entirely upon building successful online and offline communities. And what that means is that we try and understand the key elements from the psychology side, not so much the technology, but the psychology side that are going to make a community a success. And what I want to talk about today is how you build a powerful sense of community. I remember around 4 or 5 years ago, we were working with a pharmaceutical organization in Switzerland. And there was a situation where the person we knew, his boss, had asked him to develop this online community for their employees. So, and what happened is that he had gone about this the way most people go about this, which is first, he selected the most expensive platform that he could find. Next, him and the CEO, they got together with a marketing organization to write these emails that were going to go out to everybody. And third, they began holding competitions and events and activities and incentivizing people to participate in this online community. And can you imagine what happened? For the first 3 months, the level of activity just went up and up and up and up and up. But then, like most communities, it reaches this high watermark, which is they don't have anyone else that they can promote the community to, and they can't keep promoting it to the same person or the same people that have been receiving the messages. And this happens far too often. And I think one of the challenges we have right now is far too many online communities are effectively ghost towns. Most online communities that are created by organizations become ghost towns. And the reason I tell you this story isn't to make fun of this organization, but to highlight the way this organization approached building their community is the way most organizations approach building their communities. I think there are two things going wrong here. The first one is that far too many of us believe in this Big Bang theory of launching a community, which is if you could just launch it and cram as many people into a particular space as quickly as possible, then it's just going to naturally take off and explode all by itself. And what we find in practice, that doesn't happen. Every big online community begins as a small online community. And if it doesn't work when it's small, if you can't retain the members when you're small, it's never going to become a big community. And the second thing is that we focus far too much upon technology. We absolutely love technology. If you listen or read most of the discussions about online communities, we focus so much upon technology. And technology is important. And it's important we get technology right, but it's not going to be the key crucial thing. It's not going to determine whether a community will succeed or fails. So to a certain extent, we need to forget about the technology a little. I've seen very good communities on very bad community platforms, and I've seen very bad communities on very good platforms. And a community doesn't succeed just because of technology. It only succeeds if it has one thing, which is a developed sense of community. A sense of community is the idea that people that are in a particular group feel a psychological connection to that group. So it's not just a case where they register to join or participate, but they feel a genuine psychological connection to that group. And this isn't a fluffy thing, it's a very scientific concept that we can apply to develop much better communities than what we have today. And it's a sense of community that's linked to every positive benefit that we want. We find that when there's a strong sense of community, the level of customer retention and employee retention is far higher. We find that when there's a strong sense of community, that members participate more, that employees participate more in internal or external communities. And we find that when there's a strong sense of community, that the level of knowledge sharing is far higher. And that's because people aren't just visiting the community when they have a challenge they want to solve. They're visiting the community to see what their peers are doing, to see what people like themselves are doing. And this is a very powerful thing to have. So it stands to reason, if we want to be better at building successful communities today, if we want to avoid having all these ghost towns that exist, then we need to do a much better job at developing this powerful sense of community. And there are 4 parts to this, which is membership, influence, integration of needs, and a shared emotional connection. And once you know these 4 things, you can apply it to develop any number of communities that you like. It is a process that works in a universal context for any type of social group almost anywhere in the world. So we want to get really, really good at these 4 things. And the other great thing here is that you can benchmark this, you can measure where you are now, and you can develop these laser focused interventions to do much better. So the first one is membership. Membership is the idea that people in a community can tell who is and isn't a member of that group. So, for example, when I speak at Moz has a background in the SEO space. And the first year I spoke there was very soon after they began moving away from that. And what happened at the MozCon event, within 1 or 2 minutes of anyone that I met, they knew that I didn't work in SEO. They knew that I wasn't one of them. And they knew that because I wasn't excited about the same things as they were. They knew that because I wasn't using the same terms like panda or pogo sticking or all these amazing terms that SEO professionals use. They knew that because to a certain extent, I didn't even dress like the way other SEO professionals dressed. And this is really important for them because it means that people that attend that event, and if any of you get the chance, you should definitely do that. But the people that attend this event have a sense of membership. There are signals that every member gives out, consciously or subconsciously, that other people pick up and recognize and can determine whether that person is a part of their group or not. And what we need to be doing is making people feel like insiders within the community. So people don't just join, but they join and then they're taken on a psychological process to feel more like insiders amongst that broader group. When we launched our online community for community professionals, which is a very meta kind of community, what we found is that when we made it exclusive, more people wanted to join and participate. And in fact, one of the key things we can do to retain the people that join our communities is to create a boundary that separates the insiders from the outsiders. Because you simply cannot have outsiders, you simply can't have insiders unless you have outsiders. So you have to be raising a boundary. And that boundary is usually based upon the demographics or the habits or the psychographics of people that people have. So who they are, what they do, what they think or feel about different things. So, for example, I wouldn't just want to launch a community for HR professionals because that's a very broad scope and no one's going to feel like an insider if you do that. But if I were to launch a community for, say, HR professionals that have more than, say, 10 years experience in the field, I'm willing to bet that a lot of those HR professionals that have more than 10 years of experience in the field are willing to join. So we can create these boundaries of people that feel the same things as one another. Where they join, they can identify that other people like them have gone through those same experiences. Does this make sense? So we want to be making sure that there's a boundary that isn't just a registration form. And so we can pick out things that they know, skills that they have, resources that they have access to, and say, if you want to be a member of that group, this is what we expect you to have. And what you also find is when you set that boundary, far more people actually want to acquire those skills to be accepted as a member of the group. It gives you a lot of very interesting influence. And you see this internally as well as externally. So in 2011, Fortune magazine wrote that Apple had a top 100 group. So every year they'd take the top 100 people in the organization away to Camel Saddle Ranch or somewhere like that. But they discussed like the future of the company and what they're trying to do. And these weren't the people that were ranked the highest in the organization. It was the people who they felt were going to be or were going to contribute the most to the organization in the future. And that's a very powerful thing. Everyone feels a sense of connection. And what we find is that most of us want to join the most exclusive groups that we can join. You see it in most major cities around the world, where people want to be a part of these different private members clubs. So the most exclusive one, 5 Hartford Street, is a private members club where to be accepted into that group, you pretty much have to be a billionaire. But if you're a billionaire, that's the group you join. You don't join any of the others. It's a group that's specifically for you. So communities, if we want to understand the psychology, if we want to use the psychology, have to be like these places as well. We want to be turning the registration form into an application form. This is such a big psychological change because when you make people register to join, when you make people apply to join instead of registering to join, their whole psychology is that this is something that I get to do. This is something where you have to apply, where you have to get an idea that this is something that I can contribute to. This is something that I'm being accepted in. I have qualified myself to be a part of that group. And especially if in the application form you ask people, what do you think you can contribute to this group? One of the easiest things you can do right now is to turn your registration form into an application form. because it changes the whole psychology behind participation, and you'll find people are far more likely to stick around as a result. We also notice that most of the successful groups that exist have some sort of ritual that turns these newcomers into accepted members of the group. And you see this in all types of groups around the entire world, that there are rituals that people go through to be accepted into that group. And this happens internally in the corporate space as well. So at Square, the CEO of Square takes people out to the Gandhi statue in San Francisco, and he talks about his vision for the company. And it's a ritual that everyone goes through. At Zappos, they offer their newcomers, I think, around $5,000 to quit after the first couple of months, because they only want the most dedicated people within that group. So we also want to be introducing rituals and traditions into our groups as well. I'm not saying you need to haze them or do anything bad, but in a professional context, we often like people to share either one piece of advice they've learned, or share what the biggest mistake has been, or just share something that's a little bit difficult, but not so difficult it's going to scare them away. But it's definitely something that when you've gone through it, you feel a sense of connection to the other people that have gone through it as well. And the final part of this is to use their language. What we find is that a lot of community efforts feel like these top-down, manufactured, artificial things that have been created for members. And we don't want that. We want the people that we're interacting with to feel like we're building a community with them, not a community for them. And that's a different whole mindset. And a big part of that is what language, what specific words you use within the community itself. So one of the first things we do when we're trying to build a community for a client is that we will usually interview between 20 or 30 members of the target audience, really in-depth kind of interviews. And we want to look for a range of things, but among them is what are the specific words and terms and phrases and in-jokes that they use that are unique to them, that people outside of that group won't quite understand. And we want to deploy these words and deploy these terms within the community, because this is a very powerful signal that this is a community for them. If they're seeing their own in-jokes among that group used within the community, they're far more likely to think, this is a community for me. This is a community that I want to participate in. So some action points here. One is that we want to raise the barrier to entry. Two, we want more rituals and traditions. And three, we want to use common symbol systems, those exact words and terms and in-jokes and expressions that are unique to that group throughout the community. We can name parts of the community after these people as well. The second one is influence. Influence is the idea that the only people that continue participating in any social group are those that feel like they can influence the group. When people don't feel like they can influence a group anymore, they begin drifting to the sides and then they disappear entirely. And in fact, this is what you see in far too many online communities or internal communities, that very few people feel they can have influence. So over a period of time, a smaller and smaller and smaller group of people are actively participating, and you get this rampant participation inequality. The way you tackle that is by making sure that every member in that community feels like that they could influence a group. Not all of them will be able to, but everyone has to feel like that they could influence that group. And that means you have to be creating opportunities for people to have influence. And then you need to be amplifying the influence that they do have. One of my clients is a major international organization in the nonprofit space. And what we found is that they have some very successful online communities and some that aren't really working at all. And when we begin talking to the people that aren't participating, the people that are in those communities that aren't successful, they usually say the same thing, which is, well, I heard about the community and I was told to participate in that community, but I did it once, I didn't really get a response, so I don't want to participate again. If people don't get a quick response to their first contribution, they never come back, they never participate again, which means we need to be highlighting the good contributions that members make. This is a really, really simple thing to do, and I'm shocked how few people actually do it. I'm shocked how often someone will make a great contribution to a community and they will get nothing back. They will solve a challenge that someone's had, they won't even get a thank you or response or anything. And it's one of the simplest, quickest wins that we can apply right now, which is to be highlighting the great contributions to our community. And you can do that in your blogs, you can do that in your newsletters, you can do that in other articles that go out. You can respond in the discussion itself and thank the person and highlight how it had a big impact. But the more you highlight these great contributions, the more you'll get more of them. It's a really, really simple thing to do. And you can do other things. If someone makes several great contributions, you can interview them for that community. You can get more of their expertise out into that space. You might want to highlight the top comments that are being published each week within that community. So other people know that, yeah, I can also have some influence. I don't need to be a member for 10,000 years. I can have some influence right now, today. And you might also consider things like doing a member of the month or a case study on how one member tackled one particular situation. And all these things are very good, and there's no shortage of ideas you can do here, but you have to be making sure that members, when they do make a contribution, get a very quick response to that contribution that shows them the impact that they made. We also want to be creating these status boosting opportunities, which is the idea that it would be terrific if most people participated in the community because they wanted to help the group. They wanted to help the other people there. It's far more predictable and reliable that people will participate if it increases their status among that group. So if you can create these status boosting opportunities, you're going to get more people participating. You see it with Product Hunt now, where they've created all these Ask Me Anything live interviews. And the great thing about this is that anyone can put themselves forward for this. So a lot of top experts right now are participating in exactly these sorts of things because all these experts that would never participate in the Product Hunt community ever are now willing to do it because it's increasing their status, it's flattering them. And this is an easy way to engage anyone that you want to participate in your community. Create a high status position. Give them a place within the community, perhaps, where they are the expert, where people can ask exact discussions to an expert within that particular field. You can do it in other situations as well. So you can give someone a live blog that they can update. You can create all these different sorts of status boosting opportunities. And when you do that, far more people are likely to participate. Another thing we want to do is to convert people that ask questions into experts, to make them feel that they can have expertise, that they can contribute to that group. So for example, what happens very often, someone might go to an online community and say, what community platforms have a single sign-on option? You know, a very simple, basic discussion. And someone will respond to that, and then that'll be it. But every single time this happens, there's an opportunity to turn that person into a more active member of that community. So here's what we would do, or here's what we advise our clients to do. When you get a question like that, go to the person that asked the question and say, hey, thanks for asking that question. I know there were several other people as well who were struggling with that, and I think it helped them. If the question comes up again, would you be willing to answer it for other people? And usually they will say yes. Then go to the person that answered the question the first time and be, hey, thanks for answering that question. I know it helped quite a few people in the community. Do you have a list somewhere of like what platforms do and don't offer the single sign-on option? We'd love to have your expertise. And what happens is that now you've got two people who know they have more expertise that they can contribute to the community. And you can begin doing this at a very micro level, but then you can begin expanding it out to a broader and broader group. And it's a very powerful thing to be doing. Next, there's lots of people in a community who don't feel they have any experience or expertise. So what you often have to do here is to dig out what they've done recently, dig out what they've been working on, dig out what they've achieved, and show how you can apply that within a community. If people feel they have unique expertise they can contribute, they will continue contributing to that group. So, for example, we might ask someone what they've done recently, you know, and if they've, I don't know, migrated their website from one platform to the next, we'd be like, wow, that's really interesting. Would you be willing to write up a short document about the lessons you learned doing that? And now that person who didn't feel they had much to contribute now feels that they can. And you can create a whole culture of doing this. It's a very powerful thing to have in any social group. So action points here. 1, highlight the good contributions. 2, create these influential status boosting roles and amplify the influence. When someone has had influence, you have to amplify it with all the tools and promotional assets that you have. Number 3 out of 4 is a shared emotional connection. The best and the strongest social groups feel the same emotions at the same time. And this is a very powerful thing. I remember back in 2008, a friend of mine invited me to Times Square as the USA election results were being read out. And what was interesting is that at the beginning of the night, you had this very small group that were in the middle and just going crazy and celebrating. But what happens is that over the course of the night, they begin sucking everyone else in from the outside because everyone wants to feel that same emotional connection together. And this is possibly the best metaphor I can think of why a shared emotional connection is so important, is that it draws in other people and it keeps them actively participating there. So people want to keep feeling that same emotion. And we have a lot of power to create and expand upon that emotion. So we can do that in a variety of ways. One, we can create the narrative or the story behind that group, which is there's a beginning. Like what was the world like before your community existed? What was the precipitating event? What was the action or the event that caused the change? Who created the community and why? What were their motivations? Three, what is the world like now? And four, what is the world going to be like in the future? Where's the community going? And this can be really short, just a single paragraph is fine. But if everyone that joins the community knows the story of that community, they know how they can contribute to it. They know how they can put their own resources and activities to be a part of it. They feel a much stronger shared emotion with each other. So we want to be making sure that we have a clear story and a really refined, a really specific story, and we want to be sharing it amongst the broader group. The second thing is a shared history. The more members have a shared history with one another, the more they continue participating within that group. So one of the things I did when I first moved to London many years ago was to take the community professionals that lived in the area out to the World Chess Boxing Championships. Now, chess boxing, if you haven't heard of this, is the greatest sport that has been invented in the last 10 years. I think the champion is from the Ukraine, actually. And it's a ridiculous sport, but it bonds us together as a group because we now have this unique shared history with one another. So the more unique experience we have, the more unique experience, the more events and activities and challenges and things that we've gone through together, the stronger the sense of connection is we have with one another. If you look at what a lot of the top technology companies do, for example, you'll notice they have these hackathon nights where the developers get together and they stay up all night coding and developing and creating something. And that's a really interesting thing to do. But you can apply that to so many different sectors as well in terms of brainstorming or creativity or creating something that's going to be entirely unique to that social group. So the more shared history you have, the more unique experiences you can create for your audience, the more they're going to continue participating and feel a sense of connection to that group. Another thing we want to consider as well is not selling really high goals. One of the mistakes we make far too often is to give a group a really high, a really ambitious task. And we can all think of anecdotal examples where that worked. But what the data shows here is that that usually doesn't work. If a goal takes a long time to complete, if it's going to involve a lot of people and it involves a lot of work, people usually just don't bother doing it. It's far better to have a series of short-term goals that build up the momentum of that group. So what problem are you tackling this week? What are you tackling this month? What is it all building towards? And celebrating every time you hit one of those goals. Because then you can keep everyone quite focused on what they're doing. You can guide the discussions, and there's always another reason to have more activity and more content within that group. So we want to be celebrating these small victories. Now we start going down to the very granular level. In terms of the discussions that take place, how can we make these discussions more engaging? How can we make these discussions the kind of discussions where people keep coming back to participate? One of the things we can do is to solicit and encourage self-disclosure discussions. What happens far too often, especially in the B2B space for communities, is that we only allow people to exchange information in a community. So you have all these information exchange kind of discussions. And the problem with these is that they don't allow people to bond. If you can only share information, you're never going to get to know the other people. What we want to do is changing that just a little bit. So now there's more discussions about, say, who they are, what are their own thoughts and experiences and opinions on this topic, and getting as much of that information out as possible. Because the more we disclose information about ourselves, the more we see that reciprocated by other human beings, the more we trust them, the more we feel a strong sense of connection and relationships with them. So we want to be having these self-disclosure style discussions. And you see that very often the most popular discussions in many types of communities, like this one for social care workers, are based around these self-disclosure style discussions where people aren't sharing information, but they're sharing their emotions. They're investing their emotions into that community. They see that reciprocated by other human beings, and they feel a stronger sense of connection. If we prompt members to share what they're worried about, not their big fears about life, but are you worried about this might change how you work or things like that? When people are prompted to share their fears, they're far more likely to trust other people as a result. And another thing we want to do is push the discussions to the deepest possible level. Our communities should be for the biggest nerds in that particular field. And I mean nerds in the most affectionate way possible. If you're a community professional and you go to our online community, what you'll find is that we're discussing the geekiest online community stuff you can imagine, the really deepest hardcore level that you can possibly go to. So I have absolutely no idea what current detection with a Allegro ACS 756 on an 80 mega 328 means. But if I was an electrical engineer, I would know this. I would understand that this was a discussion that related to me in some way. I can only discuss these kind of things in this community. So we want to be pushing our community in that kind of in that direction. Another really simple idea is to steal the most popular discussions from other online communities. Look at other communities in the professional space or sectors like that. Look to see what are the most popular discussions, and usually you can list especially in forums, you can list the discussions by those that get the most responses, and then you can steal those discussions. You can borrow and adapt them to your type of community. So if you know that one of the most popular discussions is most ridiculous question from a nurse while on call, you can change that. What is the most ridiculous question you're being asked by an SEO professional or a marketer or any type of sector that you work in? You can adapt these kind of questions to your specific situation, and you know then that you have a discussion that's very likely to take off. And another thing we like to do is to let members brag. The more people feel that their status is incorporated within this community, the more they'll continue participating. But it's not quite socially acceptable to show off. So what we like to do instead is to create opportunities where members can show off who they are and their skills and ability in a socially acceptable way. So for example, the most popular discussion here, show off your build, show off what you've created, is a very good discussion at getting people actively engaged and participating. So we want to create these discussions where members can share what they've done. So to create a shared emotional connection, we want to be initiating and highlighting the most popular discussions, especially those that are self-disclosure style discussions. We want to be allowing more of the non-essential and perhaps off-topic discussions as well. We want to be building this very powerful connection. We want to be getting people to talk about the most emotive things that they can talk about within a community. And finally, the integration of needs. We have entirely the wrong idea, and I think I've touched upon this already. We have entirely the wrong idea about what motivates people to participate in a community. We usually think that people participate in a community just for information, and that's not always the case. What a social group essentially does, any kind of social group, is give people one of four things, or all four things, which is access to the group's shared collective resources, such as knowledge or information they have, a sense of safety in some kind, so physical, emotional safety, a place to be vulnerable with who you are. Three is the efficacy factor, where it gives you a sense of power and control over your environment to change something. You can work together to change something in your environment. And fourth, the ability to have status amongst your peers. Now, it's great when a group does all four, but what happens too often is that we usually focus on just that top one, just information, and we need to stop doing that. Instead, what we need to be doing is turning the information seekers into people that are coming and visiting to satisfy another need. The problem, as I said, with people just coming for information is that we're training them. We're training these people to only visit when there's a problem they want to solve. And that might be once a week, but more realistically, it's going to be once a month, once a year, or never. And we need to stop training people to do that. What we do want to start doing is training people to participate to satisfy their specific social needs. And that will mean needs such as their ability to connect or have influence or have state or have status. All those things aren't included in just that information side. And this goes back to the very way that we design these community platforms as well. So here's an example. This is the HR Business Network site. And this is just going to change. And this is the hr.com site. And I'm going to show you this one more time. Look very carefully at these two sites. Very similar target audiences. This is HR Business Network. What do you notice about this? What do you see about this site that's different from hr.com? Well, what you should see is that this site is dedicated to displaying the information, just displaying information and news articles or format like that. If you go to hr.com, which is much more popular, you find that they show the latest activity from members. And here's a key thing: when people join a group, they want to know who's new, who's popular, what's popular. And this site, hr.com, does that. So we want to be making sure that we're training people to interact with each other, not just passively receive information. And that means we need to put the latest activity from members above the fold, as high up in that community as possible, because that's when people are more likely to see it and how they're more likely to engage and interact with one another as well. So we want to be pushing that. We also want to be instantly socializing people within a community. So when they first join a group, that we guide them to participate in specific discussions that are going to get them as engaged as they possibly can. And we've tested an awful lot of these discussions. The ones that are most popular, we find, are those where you prompt people to share what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, or what they're fearing. I've covered the last two already, but the top two are really interesting. In most professional communities, the discussions that we like the most are things like, what are you working on right now? This is a discussion that's really good because A, people can participate in it more than once, but B, when you know that someone else is working on the same thing as you can collaborate with each other. If you've worked on something someone else is working on now, you can give them advice and expertise. The more information we have about what everyone in that group is working on, the easier it is for people to help one another, to interact with each other, and do these incredibly valuable things with one another. And the second one is, what are you thinking? We might adapt this more to, what have you recently learned? And this is where people will share articles and the best pieces of advice with each other. What are they thinking is a really interesting one, because you can participate in these top two discussions every single time you visit the community, if you like, because you're always working on different things, you're always thinking different things. So these kinds of discussions are usually the first ones we guide members towards. When you first register for one of our clients' communities, we don't send you to complete your profile page. We send you specifically to participate in one of these discussions right now, because we know that if we hook you at this stage, you're very likely to become a member of that community for life. And finally, we find that success begets success, which is people will only participate in a group that they think is going to be more successful in the future than what it is today. So success begets success, which means if it doesn't look successful, we need to make it look successful. And that usually means removing the things that aren't working. So if you post a discussion, or if you have a group or a feature that's not being used that well, then we tend to remove it. We tend to take that down and instead focus on the ones that are taken off and put more time and effort into that. Because whatever does appear on that site has to look like that it's got a lot of discussions, that it's got a lot of responses. And this becomes a self-fulfilling thing. The more successful it works at a small scale, the more successful it works at a bigger scale. And the bigger and more successful it gets, the more we ought to be highlighting how active it is, how many people are participating. If you go to feedv.com now, you'll begin to see this, so, how active their discussions are. This is the kind of level that we want to be working at. So, some action points here. One, we want to be guiding people to the discussions, not just top-down created content from us. Two, when people join, we want to be prompting members to share what they're doing, thinking, learning, or fearing upon arrival. And three, we want to remove the stuff which isn't popular. If we do this, and I'm sure we can develop the groups that not just more effective and are better for us, but are better for the people that participate in them. Groups of people who are a genuine sense of place and connection with one another. And this, I think, is one of the most powerful things that we can do in a community. Build the right kinds of groups that are going to change the lives of the people in them, or at the very least help them as much as they can be helped, and really benefit our organizations as well. Thank you so much for your time. If you want to get half my book for free, then go to download.phoebe.com. So if you go there, we'll give you half the book for free. We'll give you access to a bunch of resources, and I'll be sending out all the information for people that subscribe probably later today or tomorrow. And we'll leave that link up until the weekend. Thank you so much. Anton, if you want to wrap things up or if you just want me to end this, just let me know. Thank you.
Question, if you can see in the chat, but you have to read it out loud for sake of a recording.
This is a question. Dianche, that's how I pronounce your name. So the question is, if I understand well, to build online community is necessary to take as a factor concepts of neuromarketing. So I think there are a couple of fields right now that are related to each other and are bumping into each other, and neuromarketing is one of them. But neuromarketing is very much how the brain works. And psychology is very similar, but what we're looking at is how groups work, which is how are people evolved to participate in groups? And so it's kind of a similar field, but it's not quite the same. There might be things in neuromarketing that are very interesting. I think a lot of what's being discussed in neuromarketing hasn't been proven yet, but it's very interesting. There's lots of possibility there. I'd say if we want to build an online community well, we have to look more at the social psychology field. So how do groups work? Why do people join and participate in groups? What are the principles that apply to most types of groups? And if we do that, I think we'll be far better than reading most types of blogs or books that are out there at the moment. But thank you for the question.
More questions, guys? Okay, Richard, I have a question. You mentioned that you would change registration for application, and I understand your point, but if you ask any SEO, they would ask to make registration form as simple as possible. So just completely different approach.
So I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. So with SEO, for example, we usually, unless there's a very real reason not to, usually all the discussions are public in most of the communities that we work with. So we get all the SEO benefits there. But when I'm talking about changing the registration form into an application form, the change isn't that big. Where instead, where you might have your name and your password and your email address, all we would add to that is just one field, which is what can you offer this community? And it could be a really short paragraph, but it's just one extra box just to change the psychology. So I think it should be easy to join, but I just want to make it I just want to change that psychology so they don't instantly join. They apply and then we approve them and then they're in and then they feel much better that they were accepted into that group. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. We had a previous webinar on A/B testing. I just want to use my knowledge. Well, did you do any A/B testing or put in for registration form and put in very similar application form?
Yes, we've done this. It was around 3 years ago now. And what we found was when you use a application form instead of a registration form, slightly fewer people get through the process. But if you track 3 months later on, those people are far more likely to still be participating in that community. I can't remember the exact data, but it was definitely a significant number. So you get slightly fewer people that get in, but the people that do get in will participate much longer over the long term.
Okay. Any more question, guys? Nastasi, do you have any question? You're writing something which doesn't look like a question. Anybody has a question? Dianchi, Monique, Musa, our regulars. Anybody has a question? Oh no. Seems to be no Richard is not speaking. Okay. More questions, guys? No. Okay. Richard seems to be way out of questions. Yeah. Okay. I'll still waiting. Okay. If we have more, if you guys have more questions, you can send it straight to Richard. You have his details here on the screen, or you can send it to
That
us.
sounds good.
We'll pass. Yeah, we'll pass it to Richard. This webinar is recorded, and recordings will be uploaded very soon. Okay, Richard, thank you very much for very interesting
Thank you so much for
webinar.
having me here.
It it started kind of very difficult, but we got eventually a very great webinar. Thank you very much, Richard,
Thank
and
you.
thank you everybody for coming. Okay, we have a question actually. Uh, Richard, Richard, you still here? Richard?
Wait.
Yeah, great. Okay, we got a question, Richard.
So the question, as
It's
I
the
see it, is what type of social activity do you recommend? That's a really broad question. It would help if that was more specific. So what I would say in a community, the kind of activity that is best, and I think I spoke about this a lot, is the activity where people get to know each other well, where they're bonding with each other. And the more you have these kinds of discussions, the more you'll have discussions where people share their knowledge and help one another as well. But you need to build up that sense of connection first to have more people sharing that information as well. I really hope that makes sense. Anton, I actually had to go because I have a flight I have to catch. But thank you so much
Okay,
for
thank you very
having me
much.
here.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Richard. And okay, Richard is gone. Thank you very much for everybody who came here. We'll have more webinars next week. Monique, I'll see you when I'll see you for communication test. And thank you very much for everybody. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys, and goodbye. Thank you.